In Osaka, there is an automotive technician who hasn't had to swap out a single air conditioning compressor in over 11 years. This isn't because his clients rarely drive, nor is it due to mild weather. Instead, every single one of his patrons adheres to a nearly free, three-phase upkeep habit that the vast majority of motorists globally are completely unaware of. Once you grasp exactly how this habit impacts the internals of your vehicle's climate control, you will quickly see that nearly every astronomical AC repair quote you have encountered was entirely preventable. This isn't mere speculation. It is a fact backed by historical data from Japan's rigorous mandatory vehicle inspections, known as shaken audits. Allow me to break down precisely what is happening under the hood. To begin, we must identify the true assassin of automotive AC units. Most drivers assume the culprits are simply escaping refrigerant or a faulty compressor. While those are indeed the end results, they are hardly ever the initial trigger. The actual culprit is much stealthier and highly avoidable: contamination. Specifically, it is the toxic mix of water, dirt, and broken down lubricants that accumulate inside the sealed environment of your air conditioning loop over the miles. Once that filth travels into the compressor, the destruction is complete. Swapping out a dead compressor will easily drain anywhere from $800 to over $2,000 from your wallet at a typical garage. That is the massive invoice everyone wants to dodge. Yet motorists in Japan, at least those adhering to this regimen, practically never face that expense. Here is the breakdown of why. The initial phase of this defense is the cabin air purifier. It seems ridiculously basic, which is precisely the reason the average person neglects it completely. This filter is positioned directly between the exterior air vent and your air conditioning evaporator core. Its sole duty is to trap airborne dirt, allergens, fungal spores, germs, and other tiny particles before they can coat the delicate evaporator fins. Whenever this barrier gets choked with debris, and in typical environments, it becomes substantially filthy after 10 to 15,000 miles. The volume of air flowing over that evaporator plummets. Reduced airflow forces the surface temperature of the evaporator to drop below normal operating levels. This triggers excessive moisture buildup. That water lingers on the metal fins and inside the drainage pan way longer than intended. Naturally, a damp, pitch black and heated space buried deep within your dash serves as the ultimate incubator for mildew, microbes, and the sort of biological funk that ultimately emits that awful musty odor we all know and despise. However, that stench is worse than a mere annoyance. It is a warning sign of a mechanism that is actively blowing biological pollutants into your face whenever you blast the cold air. In Japan, swapping this cabin filter is handled with the exact same urgency as a routine engine oil change in other nations. It is a mandatory scheduled maintenance task, absolutely not a suggestion. A brand new cabin filter for a standard car will run you maybe $8 to $15 and requires under 5 minutes to install. Japanese drivers handle this annually and frequently every 10,000 kilometers if they live in smog-heavy metropolises like Tokyo or Osaka. Meanwhile, drivers elsewhere will easily let 3, 4, or even 5 years pass without even looking at it. A huge chunk of the population never changes it, period. Once that filter is so jammed that it morphs into an impenetrable brick of compacted garbage, your blower motor works overtime. Air circulation tanks, and the evaporator starts functioning completely outside of its safe temperature zone. This is exactly where the downward spiral initiates. The second phase of this regimen involves evaporator cleaner. This is the tactic that truly catches most folks off guard when they first hear of it. You see, even if your cabin filter is flawlessly maintained, the evaporator core is still going to gather biological debris as time marches on. Those metal fins are delicate, packed closely together, and remain constantly moist while your AC is blasting. Minuscule amounts of fungi, microbes, and mildew will inevitably slip through even a brand new filter. Give it enough time and they will build a thriving colony right on the evaporator surfaces. The strategy over in Japan is to utilize an aerosolized evaporator wash, one specifically designed to penetrate the plenum chamber and thoroughly coat those fins, typically done once a year. The whole ordeal takes maybe 10 minutes. You simply find the fresh air intake, which usually hides right behind the cabin filter slot, and blast the cleaning spray straight into it while the car's fan runs on high, pulling in outside air. This chemical wash gets sucked right through the fins, annihilating the organic buildup, dissolving the biofilm, and flushing it all out the bottom via the condensation drain tube. A quality can of this aerosol wash will cost you between $5 and $15. This one solitary action is the magic bullet for killing that nasty AC odor in almost every scenario where it is already cropped up, and it completely blocks it from forming if it hasn't. Yet the advantages extend far past just having a fresh-smelling interior. When the evaporator is spotless, it exchanges heat with much greater efficiency. This translates to your car's cabin hitting that perfect chilly temperature significantly quicker. Because of that, the compressor doesn't have to kick on and shut off nearly as often. Ultimately, the overall strain on every moving part within your climate control system is slashed. This provides a tangible mechanical advantage, not merely an upgrade in comfort. Your compressor simply endures fewer operational cycles throughout the lifespan of the car. Less cycling equals reduced wear and tear, and less wear naturally leads to a substantially longer lifespan. The third pillar of this routine is the PAG oil inspection. This is the exact step that divides those who truly comprehend the mechanics of air conditioning from those who just view it as a magical, cold air-producing mystery box. PAG is short for polyalkylene glycol. It is the essential lubricant constantly flowing through the refrigerant loops of basically every contemporary passenger car on the road today. Now, here is the secret most vehicle owners are completely kept in the dark about. Whenever an AC setup is running short on refrigerant, even just a tiny bit short, well before you would ever feel the air getting less icy, the flow of that crucial oil to your compressor is simultaneously crippled. The refrigerant and the PAG oil ride together side by side throughout the plumbing. A drop in refrigerant directly equals a drop in lubrication, hitting the compressor's vital bearings and internal seals. If you force a compressor to operate in a semi-starved state for an extended period, internal degradation hits the gas pedal. Eventually, the compressor just locks up and dies. When you finally tow it to a mechanic, they diagnose the dead compressor, swap it out, and hand you a massive bill. But the true cause of death was not some sudden explosive malfunction. It was the result of months, maybe years, of inadequate lubrication brought on by a tiny, slow leak that slipped by completely unnoticed. Motorists in Japan who stick to this methodology do not sit around waiting for disaster to strike. They actively have their system's pressure and refrigerant capacities verified during a preventative yearly checkup. Over there, it is seamlessly paired with the shaken audits, those strict roadworthiness exams every car must clear biennially. This inherent culture of rigorous vehicle upkeep definitely simplifies making AC checkups a habit, but you can get this diagnostic performed anywhere on the globe. Asking a local garage to read your AC pressures is frequently free or done for a very minor diagnostic charge. If the gas is indeed a little low, injecting a top-off blend that includes the proper PAG oil is dirt cheap compared to a full compressor swap. The absolute key here is intervening early, long before that compressor has been grinding away dry enough to suffer permanent fatal scarring. Now, this is where the conversation shifts from a simple garage tip to something much larger. There's a wider trend in how Japan's automotive culture tackles vehicle lifespan, which perfectly illustrates why this method exists and succeeds so brilliantly. Japan boasts some of the greatest high-mileage dependability statistics in the modern world. A typical Japanese motorist will keep their ride cruising well beyond 200,000 kilometers, experiencing vastly fewer devastating mechanical breakdowns compared to drivers elsewhere. Sure, brilliant engineering plays a role, so do the unique realities of Japanese roads and commuting habits. But a massive piece of the puzzle is purely cultural. The philosophy of shokunin, the dedication to mastery and meticulous care in whatever field you inhabit, spills right over into how many folks in Japan treat their cars. An automobile isn't merely a way to get around, it is a complex machine that pays dividends when given steady attention. Ignoring issues snowballs, proactive care multiplies. This climate control regimen isn't remarkable because it's highly technical. It is remarkable because it is executed faithfully over years, even decades. Run the numbers on this, and the contrast is genuinely painful to look at. The typical price tag for a compressor swap at a standard U.S. dealership or local mechanic hovers between $900 and $1,800 for everyday cars, climbing even higher for premium or foreign rides. Conversely, the yearly expense for this three-stage Japanese routine, a fresh cabin filter, a can of evaporator wash, and a quick pressure and oil diagnostic, clocks in between $15 and $40 based on what you drive and where you live. Span that over a decade of owning the car, and you are parting with maybe $150 to $400 for preventative care. In return, you are drastically slashing the odds of encountering the single priciest climate control disaster a motorist can ever face. The financial logic is undeniable. So why don't more people do this? It's not because it's a closely guarded secret. It's simply because the penalty for skipping it doesn't show up right away. A suffocated cabin filter doesn't trigger a glowing dashboard alert. A fungus-infested evaporator core just produces a stink that most people simply shrug off or attempt to drown out with cheap air fresheners. A marginally depleted refrigerant level just leaves the air feeling slightly less frosty during peak summer heat, something everyone easily blames on the weather outside. The internal hardware deteriorates gradually and completely out of sight until the compressor finally gives up the ghost. At that exact moment, all that compounded neglect arrives as one giant out-of-the-blue invoice. Those motorists in Japan dodging that massive bill aren't pulling off any mechanical wizardry. They are just executing 3 incredibly inexpensive habits, dependably and proactively. They swap out a filter before it turns into a barricade. They wash a metal grid before it transforms into a bacterial settlement. And they verify system pressures before the hardware relying on that lubrication becomes scrap metal. That is the whole playbook. Anybody can do it. It demands 0 specialized equipment, no wrench-turning skills aside from finding a plastic filter door, and it takes up at most half an hour annually. All it truly requires is recognizing that your vehicle's air conditioning isn't some enchanted, untouchable cube that simply functions until it dies. It is a series of mechanical parts that endure friction, metal surfaces that collect grime, and critical fluids that must be kept at precise volumes to shield the entire network downstream. Once that clicks in your mind, this maintenance habit makes perfect sense. The only real choice left is whether you would prefer to drop $15 every 12 months or hand over $1,500 every 10 years.